Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Coast-to-Coast Combat Hour. I'm your host, Matthew Hawkins, along with my co-host, Ed Carbajal, and on a weekly basis, we plan to bring you the biggest news and interviews in the world of combat sports. Ed, how you doing?
All right, man. Just grinding away through all the seasons here in Jersey. All the seasons in one day we got. So
Yeah, no, it's weather's been pretty nice out here. Actually, pretty cool. So, but a lot of action, a lot of news lately. I was obviously
yeah,
up in Bellator over the weekend, but we've had some breaking news really in the last couple days. uh, about Brock Lesnar apparently not going to be fighting Daniel Cormier any longer. Um, not real sure all the details. You were saying that Dave Meltzer was reporting earlier some news on that.
yeah. The Wrestling Observer that he does. I think it was Scoops that wrote about it first, or SE Scoops wrote about it first. And there's an article over on MMAnews.com if you want to read the exact quotes. But it would seem that the reason Lesnar quote unquote retired is because he wanted a flat fee because obviously because the pay per view model is not how people know it remember it to be. And you're the one that I actually thought of you when I read that news because you've been saying for a while like the we'll never hear pay per view numbers. So that's probably kudos to Brock Lesnar for being smart and saying, listen, I don't know how much points are worth anymore since I don't know what you guys are selling. So I don't blame him, not for nothing. I mean, if that's a contract, if that's part of the contract, and you don't really know if it's going to be it's almost like buying a lottery ticket. You don't know what you're going to make.
Yeah, well, I mean, people can knock Brock Lesnar for plenty of reasons, but he's definitely not a bad businessman.
Mm-hmm.
He's figured out a way to make a lot of money in his career through pro wrestling and trying out for football and UFC and MMA in general. Yeah, I mean, he's not going to fall for it. He doesn't need the
Yeah.
money per se. At least I don't believe he needs the money. I think he makes plenty from pro wrestling to be able to get by, especially living up in the woods up in Canada. So, I don't think it's a big deal, but yeah, he's not going to fall for the UFC lowballing and hiding the numbers. So, yeah, that was the first thing. I had a friend, commenting, "Oh, why is he retiring?" I say he's not really retiring. He's just
Yeah.
walking away because the UFC doesn't want to pay him, and I
And that's
think
a
that.
negotiating tactic in business too. Like the first thing you do, I mean, you threaten to walk away. I mean, people are still saying we'll probably see that fight, but I doubt it. I mean, obviously not. Obviously, they're already talking about Stipe in DC in August, but yeah. I mean, you called it about the numbers being a thing, and I think I wouldn't be surprised if this is something that comes across the table a lot, and we see more fighters say no thanks.
Well, I mean, in a perfect world, if he doesn't want to fight for the UFC or deal with the things, the UFC would release him. And obviously, I'm a big Fedor fan. It's not necessarily the fight that I'd like to see at this time in their career, but with DAZN being backing Bellator, I wonder what kind of money they would maybe throw at Brock Lesnar if they thought
Mm.
they could do Fedor Lesnar in Bellator.
Ooh.
I mean, like I said, at this time in Fedor's career, I probably wouldn't want to see it per se, but it seems like a big moneymaker, and if DAZN wanted to kind of
uh,
shake it up, it would it would be
yeah.
it would be there. So just throwing that out there, I have no idea if that is even possible, especially with the UFC keeps his rights under control. But in a perfect world, that would, to me, that's the scenario that makes the most sense. And
Oh my God. Like, yeah. I mean, the zone would definitely be a household name if that happened. There's,
I mean, they're
yeah.
throwing tens and hundreds of millions of dollars at these boxers. They don't really have any MMA guys. MMA is through organizations. They don't really have any exclusive kind of deals with fighters per se. So I don't know. I wonder if that would be something where they would come to the table and go, hey, here's 25 million for Brock for a 3 fight deal. We want him to fight Fedor, Bader, and Josh Barnett, or
Mm.
whatever, however it worked out, or if heck we bring him on a Russian tour and have him fight Fedor, Karatanov, and Minkanov, or so. I don't know, just something to think about and be kind of fun if that happened. But we know that fun stuff doesn't always doesn't always
No.
happen.
No.
There's always a business behind it. But As far as fights that did get signed, though, well, okay, getting back to the Brock thing, so it looks like it's going to be Stipe getting his rematch against Cormier August 17th, UFC 241 here in Anaheim. Close for me. I'll probably go. It's not a fight I'm really looking forward to. I was at the first one, and I just, if Cormier's only got 2 or 3 more fights in his career, this is not necessarily a fight that I would pick for him. So, but anyways, good for Stipe if he gets it. He does deserve another heavyweight title fight, but just not the way I would have done it. I would like to see him take one more fight to get back and knock out a top 10 competitor. But fights that did get signed, we had rumored it. I actually heard rumors a couple months ago, but didn't really want to speak out too much. I'm not here to try to break fight news or anything like that. But Kyoji Horiguchi is coming to the Bellator cage June 14th, Madison Square Gardens in your backyard to fight Darren Caldwell, going for the bantamweight title in Bellator. That's a super fight. That is
a super fight, and as I mentioned it last week, Caldwell, I mean, he's from around here. He's from Rahway, New Jersey, so he's definitely going to bring in. I mean, there's folks. The wrestling culture is pretty deep here in Jersey, and that's where Caldwell comes from. So he's going to bring like a lot of folks that are familiar with him. I mean, there's folks that know he holds the title at Bellator and don't really follow the sport, but they know Darren Caldwell is a champion over there. So they definitely are going to fill some seats in the Garden with that booking alone. Yeah, definitely a big deal.
Yeah, I mean that card. So that card's got Machina Sonnen, it's got Horiguchi, Caldwell, and it had Neiman Gracie in the second round of the welterweight Grand Prix. As a result of Bellator 220 over the weekend, he will be fighting Rory McDonald, the defending welterweight champion. Although he didn't necessarily advance the way that most saw it happening.
Yeah. I mean the fight was John Fitch is whether it's entertaining or not, it's a difficult opponent in John Fitch, and the funny thing was like Rory had a plan, and I think the comments he made afterward too was just his own frustration with himself, because obviously, not that he backpedaled, but he obviously he released a statement later this week saying he's obviously going to be in. He'll be cleared for 222 in June against Neiman, and he's the one holding the belt, so he's got to follow through. But I think that it's a frustrating person to fight, and I think that the comments he made afterwards were just his frustration. I know Fitch said he wants to hang it up too, and that's not the first time he talked about it. When he did the last final World Series of Fighting event here in New York City, he was talking about a retirement back then. So that's twice. If he wants to retire, I mean, he should, and obviously, he's had a long career, so that's on him if he wants to do it. But that fight, man, I mean, it's definitely it was frustrating to watch, but I mean, if you look deep enough, I mean, there's still things worth noting. Fitch shutting down Rory's pressure and Rory's handling the pressure from Fitch well, and getting off the cage and stuff. I personally think he just couldn't get the range he wanted to plug away and land a shot that would hurt Fitch to end the fight early the way he initially said he wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I traveled up for the fight. I've seen some mixed reactions to the fight. Actually, most people were complaining about it being boring. I love the fight.
Yeah.
And I know, you've labeled me just bleed lately, but I thought the fight was great. For me, that was kind of
you're on and off. You're like bipolar.
And I'll explain why I liked it. One, when we talked about the show and when we've kind of previewed this over a few episodes, we've all kind of assumed that Rory's was gonna work his way through this. It might have been a decision, but we'd assumed that he was gonna win this fight pretty easily. To go into the fight and see a 41-year-old John Fitch, who for about a decade was the number 2 welterweight in the entire world, and had he not come in the same era as George St. Pierre, we'd likely be talking about Fitch as a no doubt Hall of Famer, multiple title defenses, an all-time great in UFC history. So he comes along at a tough time in his career. and he gets this shot, which a lot of people didn't really even think he should have necessarily been in the tournament. He did beat Paul Daly in his Bellator debut at Bellator 199. Kind of a unexciting fight, but a typical John Fitch shutdown. So he goes into this fight, and he's fighting a guy who's kind of, at least in my mind, I thought they were kind of similar in style in a sense, but Rory had the more violent. They both kind of had the wrestle. I'm going to shut you down. I can kind of control you. But Rory obviously had the stand up and more violent. So we get into the fight, and Rory comes out, and it seems like he's going to kind of do his thing early on. And then Fitch just takes a couple of head kicks, eats them, keeps coming forward. And by the third round, you just felt like this momentum shift. And you see John Fitch doing what he has been doing for the last 15 years. And he's taking him down, and he's pitter-patting him. He's doing his thing, but he's constantly pressuring the fight and basically shut down Rory for half the fight. I appreciated him being able to do at 41 what he's basically done his whole career against somebody he wasn't supposed to do. So that's why I enjoyed it. And I don't think we mentioned, but the fight did end in a draw. It ended up in a split draw. One judge had it for Fitch. Two judges had it for a decision. I personally thought John Fitch won the fight. It was a hard fight to score. I just felt like at the end of the fight that he had imposed his will more, and that doesn't win on the scorecards. So I understand the scores. The scores from the judges were crazy, first of all. I accept a draw, but the fact that all three judges gave Fitch a 10-8 third round is absolutely ludicrous. I mean, I was rooting for Fitch as the fight progressed. I actually went back and forth. There was times I was rooting for Fitch, and then there was times I was rooting for Rory to go in and get the kill, But so the judges giving him a 10-8 was ludicrous. And then there was a later round. I think it was the fourth round, where it was about a 50-50 round, and all three judges gave it to Rory. I don't know. I was okay with the draw after. But I definitely thought Fitch had done enough to probably win, and I feel like if he was a little bit more of an exciting fighter, he might have gotten a little bit more of a lean in some of the judges' calls. With all that
statement,
with all that said, I also feel like I realized Rory's comments afterwards were a little bit weird. He talked about not being as violent, and God maybe kind of influencing him to not be as much into fighting. When you start talking like that, it makes me wonder if you need to take some time away. He took a beating by Musashi. And when that fight happened, I even mentioned that maybe the Rory that fights Fitch will not be the same Rory that we know, because you don't know what Musashi is going to do to you. And I kind of feel like that's what happened. There's alternates in this tournament. I feel like it wouldn't be. He's not going to do it, but I feel again in a perfect world, Rory wouldn't have been a bad thing to kind of step aside, say it was a draw, either let Fitch or an alternate advance, and Rory just fights the winner of the tournament, a chance to get his belt back. I don't know. I mean, that doesn't set up the fight with Gracie.
It's hard. It's a hard sell. I mean, and Gracie's not the type of guy to call anybody out. So he pretty much says he's ready for anyone he wants all the fights from everyone in the bracket. He said as much when I spoke to him in New York. But the thing is, I guess the reasoning, because since it was a draw and the title doesn't change hands and it is for that weight class, that's the reasoning behind having McDonald advance. Kind of a weak way to advance too. So I would hope that would motivate Rory to wanna, maybe turn off that lighthearted speak. I don't know what else. I'm trying to think of a nice way to say it, but I mean, even I don't know if you saw how he elaborated an hour after the fight when he went to the post-fight press conference, and he was just like, I was going through a lot of things, and I'm still thinking about the fight, and but he still said I mean, from the beginning he said he was already thinking about fighting Neiman, so I guess that's fine letting it happen that way. I hope it doesn't undersell that fight for 222 in June, just because of the way it happened. I mean, I don't know, maybe because of where it was at, they couldn't do another round, like, because it's a tournament fight. You would think it would call for another round, but it was a majority draw, right?
Yeah, but it's because it was a 5-round fight. The commissions only allow 25 minutes of action per night. So that's the result of that. I don't know. It makes the
So something
Gracie.
they should take for the PFL. PFL kept them short for that reason. So that
Yeah, I mean they're title fights though. I mean I don't mind the 5 round thing. It's just it's a rarity. We don't get a lot of decisions or
yeah,
draws, I should say. Um,
that's
I
true.
I don't know. So it's just one of those things that happens, and it's just unfortunate that it happened in a tournament where it makes it kind of screwy. It does make the Gracie fight interesting though. I would have taken, if you told me if Rory stomps through Fitch, I think he would have, I would have picked him pretty heavily over Gracie. At this point, if his mental, if he's at that point mentally where he's questioning what he's really doing in the cage, I think Gracie's going to choke him out. It's changed
Yeah.
my perspective on it. I think that, I don't know. That's just where that's what my pick is right now. We'll see where we're at in 6 weeks when it gets closer, and I've had a chance to kind of absorb what's really gone on. But just my initial reaction is that if John Fitch can do that to Rory McDonald, then a young, hungry Gracie is going to eat him alive.
Yeah, Chael actually hinted at it at the press conference in New York. The last time they were there when he fought in the Garden, Gracie was like an undercard. He was on the undercard, and people were just like, "Oh, it's just some new Gracie." And then all this time passed now, and he made it. He got past Ed Ruth when people thought Ed Ruth was going to give him problems, and now with this fight, it's like he would likely be the favorite, obviously, if once they start taking odds for it. Gracie would be against McDonald, just because that even though he backpedaled and Bellator released a statement and he released his own statement afterwards, it still makes you wonder, really, like, how motivated are you to do this thing?
Yeah, I mean, I gotta see the odds. I would assume that Rory would be the favorite, but maybe it'll be closer to even. I don't. I think Gracie is still a little bit of an unknown commodity, even though because Ruth wasn't a little bit of an unknown. So I
Hmm.
think the gambling world might not be looking at so much like we are, where we kind
Yeah,
of
that's true.
can see the talent as opposed to the name. But the Gracie name obviously still carries some weight. Also, superstar Lima Lay McFarlane on that card survived by doctor stoppage. Opened up a nasty gash on the
Hmm.
forehead of Vida Ortega in the 3rd round. Uh, Another fight I didn't go. Vida is one tough lady, and
Yeah.
her build is a tough matchup. She's kind of heavier on the bottom. She's got big legs and thighs and stuff. I don't know how to say it, but it makes it harder for the takedown.
Yeah.
She's
Well,
a
and she's
strong built woman, and it's not. It doesn't. Her build makes it seem to kind of neutralize McFarlane's ability to get her down, and her sprawling ability just kept McFarlane at
yeah.
bay for a lot of the fight.
I mean, she Artiga doesn't get the credit she deserves. I mean, not for nothing. When she fought Anastasia Yankova and she lost the decision to her, I thought she won that fight. I thought she got robbed. So and that seems to happen to her a lot. And I don't know if it's because people just knocking her because she's somebody that's always been an undercard fighter. But one person that wasn't was McFarlane. She already knew. She watched enough of her fights and said, "This is a tough chick." And she proved it because mind you, the doctor had to stop that fight. She actually wasn't. She actually did an interview. I read uh, this morning. She spoke with MMA Junkie, and she wasn't even aware that she thought the cut was. She felt the pain from the cut, but she thought it was just a welt, and she actually thought the blood was McFarlane's until they separated them, and they called the doctor over, and that's when she kind of knew things were bad, and she kept saying that she could see, but because of how you could see her skull through that cut, they were just like the doctor was like, this is not going to stop bleeding. We have to stop the fight, and but McFarlane obviously wants to give her a rematch because she probably has her own criticisms of the fight on her own end, and I think that's a rematch that I wouldn't mind seeing. I don't think we're going to see her back. She's got 15 stitches from that cut. The interview, she actually said she'd prefer to come back in December. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw that rematch sooner than that, just because of demand. But if they obviously want to go back to Hawaii, I mean that would be a nice fight to put back on the Hawaii card with McFarlane in her neck of the woods.
Yeah, that's what I figure is going to happen. I don't think they're going to risk Alimale fighting anybody before then, especially since they have this fight already set up and they can use the excuse that they got to wait for Vita to heal up and everything like that. So it kind of gives them a reason to put her on the shelf for the what is it, the 7 months or so
Yeah,
before that fight, and obviously they want her on that card. But a big win for her. She keeps her belt, moves to 10-0. Other fights on that card, I don't know if you were able to catch them. Probably the fight of the night: Benson Henderson, Adam Piccolotti. Great fight,
yeah,
action packed. Henderson squeaked out a split decision. I didn't necessarily see it that way. I had Piccolotti probably winning 29-28, but it was close. And I was happy for Henderson. He put in, he from bell to bell, both guys left it in the cage, and
yeah,
there was not a second of that fight where there really wasn't some action. Piccolotti kind of took him down in the third round and kind of was running the clock out a little bit, but the first first 2 rounds were straight fireworks. So kind of get that, and then Henderson reversed it at the end, and probably is what influenced the judges a little bit to give him the nod. But a good fight for both guys. Phil Davis, Liam McGeary. Picked Davis to win. Didn't see it becoming a kickboxing fight,
yeah,
and I don't know where McGeary goes from here. I'm not sure. There was a time I thought he was a top 10 light heavyweight in the entire world.
yeah,
He was the
man.
Bellator champ, but he just doesn't seem to. I don't know. I can't put my finger on it, but he just doesn't. Maybe he needs to go and fight some little lesser competition, get a couple wins, and really get his mojo back. I don't really know what else. I don't see him beating any of the top guys in Bellator anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it was an odd. I mean, not odd, but I mean, he lost a tooth, broken jaw. Um, and even with I thought we would have seen something different because he changed camps, but whatever it is, it's him. He's got to figure it out. I know they were talking. Somebody had spoken to him during fight week about because he's got a kid now, and they're like, "Would you want your kid to fight?" or something to that effect. And he was just like, he was saying negative things about the sport and the business side of it. So maybe there's something there that's making him not have that fire he had when he was coming up. Because I remember when he made his way up to get when he held the title, he was knocking out guys left and right, doing the two inverted triangles and all that stuff. But so I don't know, but whatever it is, he's got to figure it out. And with that injury, he's gonna have the time to do it. So I guess we'll see. But yeah, I mean, seems like a short like rise to the title, and then it's just like he's now was he three in a row now, right? He lost.
Yeah, I mean, well, he's lost to. Let me double check on that. He might have. He beat. He squeezed in a win over King Mo in the middle there. So
Yeah, that's right.
He lost to Vassal. He lost to Nemkov. He beat King Mo, and then he lost to Phil Davis. So he was coming
Yeah,
off a win. But yeah, I don't. I don't know. I feel like he needs to go work with somebody like Freddie Roach or something and just figure out his boxing. I mean, he's 6'6", but he doesn't really use his length. Early on in Bellator, he used to use his jab and his reach.
yeah,
He knocked guys out, and I don't know. I mean, Phil Davis looked great in the fight. I mean, for what Phil Davis does, for him to stand in front of McGeary for 2.5 rounds and finish him standing basically, and then I mean he ended up finishing him on the ground, but it was after he dropped him and broke his jaw. And I mean, props to Phil Davis, but if you would have told me the fight would never really hit the ground until 2 minutes into the third round, I probably would have told you that Davis was getting pummeled up a little bit, but
yeah.
didn't happen. Speaking of things that didn't happen, Jacare during UFC Fort Lauderdale the same night, I predicted him taking the fight with Hermanson wasn't a good decision, and that's kind of how it turned out. Hermanson wins a unanimous decision, basically 3-2. But he pretty much dominated the whole fight. Souza had a couple minutes where he did some good striking, but just a I don't know. I like I said, when you get older, him taking a last minute replacement against the up and comer was not the decision I would have made if I was his team. From a fan's perspective, it's great. The main event didn't get completely canceled, but I wouldn't have taken that fight. It was just set up to have something like this and allow Hermanson to thrive in his first main event opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, when was the last time Jacare fought? Didn't he come back off of something, or he had a layoff?
Well, he fought Weidman at 230. He got the knockout.
Yeah, so it's like,
But he's been alternating wins and losses. He beat Tim Boach. He lost to Whitaker. He beat Brunson. He lost to Gastelum. He beat Weidman, and now he loses to Hermanson.
Yeah.
He knew he was about a fight away from the title, and I think he would have played his cards better to kind of.
Hey, maybe they could do him and Branch. I mean, him and Branch have been trying to get. Branch wanted him for a little while. I don't know where David Branch is after his loss, but that wouldn't. I think that'd be a nice co-main event, or undercard fight on the main card or something. If they're still doing working with Branch and him,
Yeah, no, that fight makes sense. A rematch maybe with Gastelum makes a little bit of sense, since their first fight was a split decision, and a lot of people thought Jacare won that fight. So perhaps that's another fight that can kind of keep him relevant. Honestly, a rematch with Chris Weidman would be a good fight. That was a fight of the year candidate for last year. So there's still fights for him. I just, I don't know where he. It's just not the fight I would have taken, and I don't know if Jacare's got to be a stand-up fighter. He just is not. He's not going to be a world champion. I think we can all kind of agree on that. So that was the main event. Other fights of note: Mike Perry defeated Cowboy Oliveira by decision in a great, outstanding back and forth fight. Both guys hurt each other, but it went kind of how we both predicted it. The heavy puncher eventually caught up to Oliveira.
Yeah, Oliveira has trouble with those rough and tumble brawler type dudes, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, he comes out and does damage early, and then he eventually gets hurt. I mean, it's just if you're a brawling style, eventually you get hit, and he doesn't seem to rebound as well as some of the other guys.
As Mike Perry.
As Mike Perry does. There you go. Or speaking of that, Glover Teixeira, who took a beating from Ian Cutelaba early, rode out the first round. And came back in the second round and was actually able to finish a tired Cutelaba with a rear naked choke. Big win for Glover. Keeping him relevant even after all these years. His 29th career win. Corey Sandhagen defeated John Lineker. Another split decision. Another all-out brawl for about 3 rounds. Both guys kind of did what everybody expected. I wasn't watching the fight as closely as I probably should. I actually thought Lineker won. Now, being a split decision, obviously one of the judges kind of agreed with me, but I was leaning towards him. I was a little bit surprised by the decision, but
I was happy with that decision because I won money on that fight.
Well, there you go. But no real losers in the fight though. Both guys' stock will rise, and both guys can have any fight that they want because people will pay to watch them. Probably a bigger win for Sandhagen as he moves to 11-1, and it gets his name out there. So that's pretty much it for the Bellator and UFC wrap up over the weekend. This weekend there is a UFC card in Ottawa, UFC Plus card. So not one of your favorite things in the world, but couple fights of interest. The co-main event: Derek Brunson and Elias Theodorou. Interesting fight. I think I feel like Elias is probably on the way up, where Bronson's kind of peaked and is probably on the downside of his career.
I only think Theodorou might take this one just because not so much because of what you just said, but because Theodorou is just a weird, like awkward, gangly, like goofy fighter. And I think that's a hard fight. Like I don't know if you've ever trained with anyone that just moves the way he moves. It's kind of like annoying and just annoying and weird. Like that'll throw off your game and you'll lose because of that.
Yeah, and somebody like Brunson kind of just comes straight forward.
Yeah.
So that style could definitely throw him off a little bit and possibly open himself up to some counters. I don't think it'll be a finish. I think Theodorou will win a decision on Saturday night. And
yeah, I agree with that.
And then the main event, Reginald Iaquinta uh, from your woods against Cowboy Cerrone.
Strong Island, yeah.
Against Cowboy Cerrone, potential fight of the year candidate again. If both guys come out,
Yeah,
I'm kind of on the fence on this fight.
me too.
Um,
Hard to pick because they're both killers.
they are, and stylistically, I feel like Al will have size on Cerrone, and probably have some power.
Yeah,
But I think Cerrone is more active, and
and he's more technically sound, I would say, as far as like a striker because of his kickboxing background. I mean, they're both. I want to say as far as their submissions and grappling. Well, not the wrestling, but like the submission grappling. Um, I would say. I mean, Iaquinta trains with high level grapplers coming. The Longo, Sarah Longo, it's all there's all jiu-jitsu guys in there with Longo striking. Um, but Iaquinta might have the better wrestling. That'll be so he might have better pressure. So I want to say he could probably squeeze out a decision, maybe. But obviously if Cerrone is on the way he's been, he could tag him up too. I mean, Iaquinta could take a punch, obviously, but
yeah, I mean, I think Al's got the better wrestling. Obviously, I think Cerrone has the better submission skills, the better
mm,
jiu-jitsu. Um, God, let's see, it's a 5-round fight. I don't know. I mean, like I said, this is a toss-up fight. I'm gonna go with Raging Al by a late finish,
mm,
due to punches. I could see him. I feel like Cerrone might kind of gas him. I know his gas tank is never been questioned, and I'm not questioning it now. But I feel like he might come out, do some damage early. Al will survive it and maybe land something big.
yeah,
That kind of that dazes him down. Maybe late in the fourth, early in the fifth. I don't know. If you're listening, I wouldn't put any money on that, but that's just
yeah.
how I'm
I'm actually
envisioning it.
I'm actually not betting on this weekend. I usually bet a few fights, even if I'm like I always bet a few something or find a parlay that interests me. But this card overall is one that I'm just gonna stay away from. And this fight in particular, like, it's hard. I mean, what you're saying makes a lot of sense because I could see. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I mean, there's been times where Cerrone's had trouble with guys that press him. I mean, he had that issue that happened with Darren Till. I'm trying to think who else gave him a hard time.
I mean,
That
RDA did, but it was quick. He came
yeah.
out, he stormed him, and hit him with a body shot. That's actually something I could maybe see. Al hits him, throws some kind of punch to the body, does
Hmm.
some damage, and is able to get in on him
Yeah.
and finish him. It'd be curious to see the size difference when they do their weigh-ins tomorrow. Um, I mean,
Yeah.
Al's fought at 170. I guess they both have. Um,
Yeah.
I
But they're
imagine.
both. I mean, 155 and I mean, it's not like Cerrone's been there before and Iaquinta's been. That's where he's been. So I don't know if that's going to be too much of an issue. I think the pressure. I'm going to lean towards Iaquinta, not just because he's from Strong Island, but because just because I think he might be able to weather the storm of Cerrone, and like you said, I just feel like guys like Iaquinta are bad news for Cowboy.
Yeah, and I mean a win for him puts him in a huge money fight. I mean, I know he got that last minute title fight with Habib in last, I believe it was last April, but
Yeah, the Connor bus incident that whole week.
yeah,
Yeah,
so
223.
223, yeah. So I mean that was a kind of a last minute thing, but a win here basically gives him, there's not many options. You got maybe Holloway, you got Ferguson, and you got Connor. There's not a lot of other you know, he at that point he's established himself that he's beaten everybody below his ranking at number 4. So
Do we
I don't
have
know.
Connor though? I mean,
Well, I'm
if
not
we go
saying I'm.
if we go back to the Brock and the ESPN thing, I wonder if that's going to be something Connor is going to retire from too.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm just pointing out guys that are ranked
Yeah,
ahead of
yeah,
him
I
that
hear
would,
you.
that he would be on his radar and he would have a legitimate argument to be able to fight. I mean, right now Cerrone's a perfect matchup for him. It allow. He took the fight with Habib last minute, but he still hadn't necessarily been a world. I mean, He hasn't been a world beater. He hasn't beaten anybody that we would consider necessarily a world champion. So this is kind of a fight where he gets to fight another, not a journeyman, not a gatekeeper, but a real constant, top 5 fighter in the world, and then make that jump to fight the world champions and the number 1 contenders. So I don't know. I think it's going to be a good fight. Look forward to it. So we got UFC that Saturday night. Earlier in the day, well, starting off, actually, the action kicks off with big time MMA Friday night for the females. Invicta Fighting Championship.
Phoenix Rising
8 female tournament, 115 pounds. Kicks off on Fight Pass Friday night, 8 p.m. Eastern time. That'll be fun, going old school with a tournament. Saturday, we got the Bellator. There's actually a Bellator event in Birmingham, England. Brett Primus versus Tim Wilde. Should be another good fight. Derek Campos is also on the card, along with Fabian Edwards. And Raymond Daniels makes his Bellator MMA debut. He is currently the Bellator kickboxing world champion and was a Glory champion. And he's 0-1 in MMA, but that fight was a few years back. So we'll see how he does there. That kicks off approximately, I believe, 2:30 Eastern time on Bellator.com. Then the UFC card is that evening also, and then in the boxing world on DAZN, 8 p.m. Eastern, possibly 9 p.m. Eastern. The main card for Canelo Jacobs kicks off. So
we'll try and get Daniel, who was out here in New York drinking with me. We actually took him to the Garden so he could see where a lot of DAZN events happen. We'll try to get him on, maybe talk about that fight next week. No promises, obviously, with our flaky ass guests.
Just quickly on boxing, did you see that Miller, who tested positive for 3 different steroids or whatever, and lost his fight with Joshua? Did you see that they headed down to suspension?
No, I didn't. 6
months.
Oh wow!
6 months for basically testing positive for animal tranquilizer. So that's the world of boxing. Yeah. But so that really won't hurt him too much. He'll get another fight lined up probably by the end of the year. But anyways, so that's the action. Invicta, UFC, Bellator, Canelo Jacobs. Look forward to it all. Fans can always catch us at Combat Hour on Twitter. Catch me at MMA Hawk 21 on Twitter and Instagram. You can follow Ed at Carbazol on Twitter and at Carbeerzol on Instagram. Look forward to talking to you over the weekend and seeing how this action unfolds, Ed.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I'll definitely be. I'm not going out drinking with anybody visiting from the West Coast, so I should be around watching fights. Really quick, the MMA World, the Fighters Only MMA Awards. There's a link up on the Twitter handle for this podcast. MMA media outlet nominees. One of them is SureDog. I write for them, so if you guys wouldn't mind going out and clicking a vote, greatly appreciate it. It'd be nice if SureDog got some of their old school, popularity back.
Yeah, and it's not MMA, but rest in peace, Peter Mayhew, actor who played Chewbacca. Big part of I know both of our childhoods, so. Rest in peace to him and thoughts to his family. He passed away at 74 today. Until next week, Ed, I'll talk to you.
All right, man. Peace.